Welcome to Darkly Lit, where we explore a giant Japanese mansion in the middle of nowhere full of dolls and creepy shit. I'm your host, Kayla King. I'm joined by my other two wonderful co-hosts. We have Sade.
Hi, I'm here. Wait, did you say walls or balls? Because there were some tanuki balls at one point.
There were tanuki balls, big-ass tanuki balls. You are correct. I said dolls.
Dolls! Okay. I like that better.
But I could say that we explore a Japanese mansion in the middle of nowhere full of creepy dolls and tanuki balls.
Thank you.
And our other co-host, David.
See, all I got was a book full of silverfish.
So, we had just finished reading the novella Nothing But Blackened Teeth by Cassandra Khaw. Before we delve into this novella, our haunted house novella set in Japan, David, you want to give the description?
I do enjoy a good haunted house story. Mm-hmm. I'll do the best I can because my reading of this came off the whole thing very dreamlike, at least because of the prose used in the story. So if I struggle with some of the ways to describe things, it's mainly because I'm still trying to wrap my head around some of the writing. The basic gist of it is you've got 5 friends who are spending a unusual wedding ceremony at a old Heian mansion. We're talking a legit, abandoned, decrepit, and definitely haunted mansion. And they all know this going into it. Like, that's the idea, is they're hoping it's haunted. We got our 5 characters who have apparently all been friends for a long time, but are all kind of at odds with each other. Time has kind of done that to them. You've got Kat, who's our protagonist, our narrator. You've got Philip, who is the pretty boy, white guy. You have FaZe, who is the groom-to-be, and his bride-to-be, Talia, both of which are, sort of this epicenter of this. Philip is also the rich guy who paid for the house and paid for the trip in general, so they could all do this. And then Lynn. He's Lynn. He's true. There. And he just seems kind of... You'll have to forgive me because I have a hard time wrapping my head around these characters who, right after getting there, kind of get into a bunch of petty squabbles with each other as sort of old wounds resurface, especially between Talia and Kat, but you start to notice it between other people as well. Part of the point of them being there is to try and have some sort of spooky ritual to go along with this wedding setup. And they learn a little bit about the history of the house. Supposedly a woman who was set to be married, her groom never appeared, but she wanted to wait for him, so she buried herself alive in the foundations of the house. And there's some bit about how potentially other women were also buried in the foundations of the house in order to keep it going. Either way, it's got traditional, very, very spooky Japanese yokai ghost storytelling all over it. They play the game where they light the 100 candles and tell ghost stories. And when Kat finally gets around to telling her story, she's already kind of felt some sort of presence in the house. And that brings about the presence of the Ohaguro Batari, which is a woman with no face and nothing but blackened teeth, hence the title. This entity, which is apparently the ghost of the woman that was buried alive in the house, ends up spiriting away Talia and making the whole house basically come to life, or the house itself is already full of spirits. And the friends get lost in the mansion, but not really. There's a feeling that they could leave at any time, but FaZe doesn't want to leave his fiancée behind as much as the others want to value self-preservation. They go through various stages of being genre savvy and also not genre savvy, which is very unusual. FaZe is convinced that in order to get Talia back, they need to do some sort of ritual involving a book. And then when they find said book, he thinks that it has something to do with putting bits of blood, bone, cum, and organs in the 4 corners of the house to represent the 4 kings. It all seems like a very strange and unusual ritual. No one can make sense of it. But either way, eventually it leads to Lynn and Kat sharing a joint while FaZe and Philip fight each other. Philip breaks FaZe's nose. FaZe disembowels Philip, and Philip dies. His sacrifice is enough to make them get Talia back. The ghost lets them go. They burn the house down to cover up their crimes. They go home. They have to lie about it. They drift apart. And Kat is convinced that she might still be haunted. But is it really the ghost that's following them or her own guilt? I don't know. That's my summary. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty decent summary.
I suppose.
There's a lot to it. I will say the one thing with the writing of this story. So Cassandra Khaw, I had to look up information about them. This is not their first novella, but they've written another one. But a lot of their writing is usually for RPG books. They actually recently wrote for Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
There's a lot of good story building in that.
There's a lot of writer credits in that I've noted. It doesn't say who wrote what parts of the book, and now I'm curious to know what Cassandra Khaw was involved in in there.
They also assisted with another Dungeons and Dragons book as well, the one about the Critical Role world.
Oh, yeah, Call of the Netherdeep.
Yep, that's it. But I think that gives a little context into the writing style.
Yes.
Which, first of all, maybe I should ask, what is your opinions about this story? What did you like? What did you dislike?
I didn't hate it, but I didn't take anything away from it either. This was honestly just a ghost story that I'm probably never going to think back on too much. That sounds kind of mean, I'm sorry. But, like, I will say that, like, after what our last book was, it was refreshing to just read a straightforward ghost story. I don't want to, like, complain about the flowery prose too much.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't excessive. I feel like it was a bit excessive. I don't think I'm the only one who thought that. But I'm a little flowery when I write things too. Like, I love describing creepy shit. And I think one of the comments that I saw in the Discord of people discussing the book was this comparison, how she, like, kind of wrote a lot of comparison to food with creepy stuff. One of my favorite writers, Poppy Z. Wright, does this where they describe food and viscera in, like, the same kind of, like, energy, and, like, I've always really appreciated that. So, like, some of the flowery shit, like, there were some really great visuals that, yeah, okay, that would be really cool to see, and, like, the visual that it produces in my head is pretty fucking cool. But did it become too much? Yes, but I think if it, like, wasn't there, this would have gone from, like, a 3-hour audiobook to, like, a 30-minute creepypasta. But, I mean, overall, it was refreshing in a sense.
Okay, so I will say up front, this writer's style, as you described as flowery, the term for this is called purple prose, which can be very hit or miss. Purple prose tends to be very over-descriptive, a lot of metaphors, a lot of similes. This writing style was mostly associated with the romantic writers of the British period. Actually, that's one complaint a lot of readers will have about Frankenstein, is they don't expect it to be so purple prosy when they first read it. But then when you realize, well, it was written during the Romantic period, not the Victorian period. This is my English major geekery coming out, sorry. So, as a result, purple prose can either throw people off, or because it's so descriptive, a lot of people can like it. And for me, I think it is hit or miss. I agree. When the purple prose is used correctly, I really like it. Like in here, the food, great. The haunting part, that's what I need. When we're talking about the drama, and I feel like that's when we were talking about this on Discord or hearing this from Discord, that seems to be the point of contention for a lot of people, is when the purple prose is used during, like, the dramatic parts, or when the individuals are talking, or our characters are talking, especially when their relationships feel kind of petty. Again, I think this is another hit or miss thing too. I don't like the characters at all, but I wonder if that's intentional. I wonder if they're meant to be unlikable because that fits the horror story trope of unlikable characters that end up having bad things happen to them.
I think in contrast with the fact that the characters are kind of unlikable, and I agree, is the fact that with the purple prose, it's contrasted with the fact that their dialogue is super straightforward.
Yes.
Which is interesting. I actually do think that's an interesting choice. Everything, their emotions and everything are surrounded by this really, really descriptive, very, like, beat for beat, just symbology, again, the prose. But you get to the dialogue itself, it's just like, what the fuck, dude? which is really funny and kind of interesting. My problem is, I think the prose works best when, well, maybe I'll start with where it doesn't. Because where it doesn't work is getting me to understand the relationship with these characters and getting me to understand how deep these relationships are. Because I got confused early on about how long they've known each other. And it's only later on that we know that they've all known each other since they were like 16. But I almost get the vibe that Talia didn't or wasn't part of that clique. And there's some disassociation with how, like, the characters, came and went, their timeline. So when things happen between them, it comes off as petty because the prose doesn't convey as well as I'd like the history, trying to understand what the relationship with these characters are and what they went through. And there's some good emotional beats where they're talking about, or where you're getting Kat's perspective about like how she felt walled out of their lives and how Talia and her just fucking hate each other, and how Talia is a petty bitch, and stuff like that. But Philip and Lynn and there's complicated relationships, sure, but I don't think we see enough of the history or know enough about the history to really grasp why a lot of these things are happening. We don't know enough about the characters. The characters are almost a little bit archetypical, and even when we know a little bit about them later, it doesn't improve it much for me or give me much more clarity as to how this worked. Now, that being said, where the prose does work is when we get to the haunting. And the haunting is conducted, it's like once we get to kind of the latter half of the book where the haunting really starts and they start freaking out and everything becomes really surreal and trippy and grotesque, that's when the writing, I think, really shines. Like, we are getting these phenomenally descriptive bits about the haunting, and specifically, a Japanese haunting. And it's really cool. I really enjoyed this part of the book. Even the characters couldn't track it down enough for me at this point, when we got this horrible ghost woman and these painted yokai following them from room to room, and these like surreal moments where they're moving from like outdoors to indoors to like the whole mansion being this rotting, decrepit, decaying thing. You got dolls with like insects worming their way out and books that are just decaying and full of fungus and insect casings. And it's like, it's so gross, and I think it gets across the feeling of a genuinely disturbing, ancient, haunted place. And I think that's what works for me. That's what worked for me through the book. I wanted to end on a high note there on this, my thoughts on it, because while the characters didn't work for me, the overall ghost story part did. It kind of left me wanting, but at the same time, I did enjoy it once the pace of it kind of picked up with the ghostly parts.
Yeah, no, I think I'm in pretty much the same boat as you are, where like the characters I didn't attach to any of them at all. They didn't interest me at all. Their interactions were like, petty, almost stiff even, and like but all the stuff with the imagery of the hauntings and the house itself, like all of that was wonderful.
Now we're on the same page.
I completely agree. A lot of the decisions they make kind of confuse me. So first off, the premise itself. You have 5 friends who have traveled to Japan for 2 people to get married at a high-end mansion, especially since the bride, Talia, has always wanted to get married in a haunted place. Totally understandable. I'm all down for that. My issue with it, though, is I'm kind of confused why it's just these 5 people and they don't seem to really like each other that much. I mean, yes, I know they've been friends for a while, but we have the bride and the groom, Philip, who's basically footing the bill and will be marrying them, but then Kat's there, and clearly Talia hates Kat. Like, she does not hide it at all. Like, why are you here? I don't understand it. And then our other guest, Lynn, who apparently is, I don't understand fully the relationship between Lynn and the rest of the group, because when he first arrives, he's like, I'm just here for Kat. And he doesn't even remember the Philip and Faze being his groomsmen. And even then, I'm kind of confused by...
Or it wasn't like he remembered Philip, but he doesn't remember Faze?
Yeah. So I'm like, why are you here then if you don't really know the bride and groom that well? Or you don't have much of a relationship with the bride and groom, especially if it's just a wedding of like 5 people involved.
I think what it was Faze, Philip, and Kat were the friends since they were 16. And then Talia came in at one point. Then I think Lynn also came in through Kat. That is like, oh, okay, I need groomsmen. I'll invite Kat's 2 best friends. But yeah, that's kind of the conclusion that I came to, that I sort of got to at the end. But that's me just making assumptions. In no way did the book really clarify that.
Because another thing I'm confused by is because Kat makes a joke about Philip ghosting her. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, they dated, but then he ghosted? How do you ghost someone if you're still talking to each other? Isn't the idea of ghosting basically you stop talking to him and never see him again? What the heck?
Also, there's also implied that Kat had like a really bad mental breakdown. And
yes.
While she was away, the group kind of like consolidated away from her, or at least she gets the impression that Talia almost tried to wall her off from the rest of the group. I don't know. I just know that she's supposed to be best friends with Faze, but I don't quite see it play out. I don't really see them having a friendship. It's just kind of like they're just kind of there. It seems like she has the most chemistry with Lynn, almost to a point where it seems romantic, but Lynn is married. And Lynn apparently got married without telling Kat, because Kat at the time was not in a great place, and they argue about it too. It's just, they have these complicated relationships that don't feel complicated enough. We get snippets. We don't get the complexities.
I'm more confused by the decisions. Like, okay, Lynn gets married out of the blue and doesn't tell Kat, who they clearly have a friendship together with, and then he only comes to this wedding for her, doesn't really know the bride and groom that well, but he's there, I guess. And it's also a destination wedding. This isn't like, oh, we're all hanging out at like someplace a couple hours away. They had to fly to Japan. I mean, maybe Philip probably foot the bill for all of them. That could be possible, but
I think they do say that Philip paid for all of them to fly out there.
Okay, so
yeah,
okay, in that case, it's more like, well, it's a free trip, so Philip's offering the.
Yeah, I don't know. I get what you're saying though. A lot of it's like, okay, why are you here? Like it is. I can believe a group of people having these like complex relationships, but like I feel like maybe the author wanted us to fill in the gaps, but there are too many gaps for it to really feel either believable or like just to make sense on like the front facing, like just very like, okay, what the fuck is going on with these people? Like, yeah, no, the characters are a mess.
I think it was a bit too short for that. I think with a longer book,
I think you're right. Yeah. There's too many complex relationships for the amount of time that we had with them. Like, what I would have loved, I think this might relate to one of the questions that we got from a reader. The part where they were going to tell ghost stories. It would have been great if, like, each character had told, like, a short little snippet of a story that kind of maybe reflected on their relationship with someone else in the group, you know? Mm-hmm. Like, that would have been a great place to, like, let us see more of, like, these characters' backstories with each other.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's one the thing I was kind of craving is knowing more about their relationships, knowing more about who they were and how they became friends and what caused them to fall apart and what brought these other people in. You know, the complex interpersonal stuff, because it's, when you don't have that information, it does come off as kind of petty. Again, that's kind of our takeaway from it.
Here's another thing, too. The book is clearly genre savvy, and they actually make references to that. I mean, there's this whole joke between Lynn and Kat, where Lynn's like, I'm the jokester in the book. We're Asian. You're bisexual. We're the ones that die first. Philip's gonna be okay.
Spoilers, Philip's the only one that dies. There's only one corpse in this book besides the ghost itself, and that's Philip, which is actually kind of interesting. I was expecting more of a body count.
I was also expecting more of a body count, but I do like that it was like, no, Philip's fine. He's the white guy. He's the rich, white, blonde guy. He'll be fine. And he's the one that bites the dust. So I will say I appreciated that.
Philip is the only white boy, blonde-haired, blue-eyed jock.
Guts on the floor. Oh, wait, that's later.
Yeah. I also expected a higher body count. I thought almost all of them were gonna die, in all honesty, and except for Kat. But
there's a bit in there when they're talking about how the like the prose is interesting when it comes to the hauntings themselves, but sometimes when it comes to the characters, it just creates, to my mind, creates more confusion, and sometimes it makes unintended hilarity. Like at one point, I think they compare Faye's. This is later on. Like the mansion kind of warps and distorts his look. Either it's his reflection or something of him in the brass mirror to looking like a hairless Chow Chow, and that just made me chuckle. Like one thing I will give the book credit for, because my feelings on it are fairly mixed, but I do like that there was only one body, and that the house ultimately wasn't what killed him. It was one of his friends. I mean, the house pushed them to extremes, but I kind of like that it was just this like crime of passion almost,
What did we think about the ghost in this story?
It's cool.
I'd kiss her.
Taste that tea, iron, lacquered tooth.
Coppery. Yeah.
Funny enough, I can't remember who it was, but in the Discord, they were like, why does she have blackened teeth? What a strange choice. And then I said, oh, that's a cultural thing.
Yep.
So for those who don't know, in Japan, especially near the end of the Heian age, it was common to blacken your teeth, usually for beauty purposes. Like I think it was considered a beauty standard, similar to like in China, they would bind their feet because smaller feet was considered attractive.
Uh-huh.
And what other weird beauty practices all around the world. So blackened teeth is one of them.
I love the idea that since you talk about the thought of kissing the woman with the ghost woman, is like, I love the fact that Kat had the same thought at one point.
Yeah, that's why I said it.
I know, as I'm saying. I appreciate that.
I think I'd sooner get down with some spoopy demons than ghosts. That is my preference, if anyone wanted to know.
Oh, now we know. Demons greater than ghosts.
Sade prefers the yokai over ghosts.
Cryptids? Then it depends on the cryptid, but we'll get into that another book, maybe.
Mothman,
right.
You sexy beast.
Here's a dumb question, since I was thinking about this too, actually. Of the yokai since the story has yokai in it, what's a yokai you'd kiss?
Maybe a tengu? I don't know. I've always had a thing for like bird-headed characters.
Oh yeah. Would you prefer the bird head or just the long nose?
No, the bird head. Apparently, if we're gonna cross into potential like furry territory, I think I end up falling somewhere what's called the scaly, because I really like reptoid characters.
You and David.
Now hold on there. Hey.
Oh yeah.
Hey now.
I mean, there's a reason Rafferty has a snake tail.
I'm not attracted to them. I just think Argonians are cool in the Elder Scrolls. That's all.
I'm sorry.
I mean, like the lizard from Spider-Man. Like, have I talked about him before?
No.
And like how I can't forget about this dream I had as a child where we were selling ice cream together in an ice cream truck, and it was the most romantic thing ever.
That's incredible.
Oh man. Anyway, before I embarrass myself anymore, listener questions, comments?
Yeah, let's
concerns?
Let's do that.
Okay, so we actually got our first recording. So thank you to Urkelbot666 or Dan, who actually emailed us and sent us a recording of him giving his thoughts.
We have had one recording in the past before from Alex. Forever ago.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
But our first recording in like forever. And I think we like stopped saying that was a thing that we would accept. So remind people more like, yeah, you can send us your comments as a recording. We'd love to hear it.
I thought that the story underneath all the prose here was decent, and it was actually pretty effective horror. The descriptions of the environments and the sensations that the narrator experienced were well thought out and immersive, up to a point. I loved all the bits about the hauntings and the evil entities constantly watching from the walls and jeering at the characters. The main issues I had with this came down to the over-descriptive, glib nature of the writing. It was so laden with adjectives, adverbs, simile, and metaphor that I was getting kind of annoyed by the end. It made the story stutter for me. Some of the descriptions were great and totally spot on. The parts about chewing on gristle or the scent and the feel around the black water, those stood out especially to me. When the author talked about the food they were going to eat, I legitimately started to get hungry. However, the repetitive nature of describing one thing in several different ways really wore thin. I got it immediately that Philip was the golden boy. He's the Fred of this Scooby-Doo mystery gang. I don't need it pounded into my head over and over the entire story. I empathized with the characters on certain levels, the narrator mostly, but overall I didn't connect with them. They're childish, and I think that's kind of the point. If so, then well done by Khaw. The book has youth and fire to it, and it is an experience, but I think it could have been improved as an overall narrative with some restraint and a little bit of editing. If your 120-page novella references chiaroscuro and the color of expensive chalk 2 times a piece, and it isn't about the process of art, it might be worth revising a little bit.
I will say, I hadn't thought about the part where you realize how young the characters might be. Now, how they might come off as more naive and petty, as childish.
I think they're in their early 20s, mid-20s.
Then that makes sense.
I don't know why. I guess I imagined them, maybe late 20s. Because with all because some of them have been in school for a while, and some of them are getting married and are married. And then, Philip had all this stuff under his belt that he'd also done. I got the impression that they weren't, young, but they were, decently aged.
I assume they were younger than us. Not by a lot, but young enough where it's they're in their 20s and petty stuff like this still bothers them. But then again, there are people I know in their 30s and 40s and even older who would discuss petty stuff like this, and you're just like, how old are you again? But yeah, thank you so much, Dan. A lot of what he said is basically what we discussed, so I'm glad we're not the only ones who think this way.
Yeah. I mean, I have a feeling that a lot of people here are kind of on the same page with us, but I'd be still curious to hear what other people think. So I appreciate Dan coming through and very succinctly saying what we're already thinking to a degree, and offering a few other caveats here and there.
And then we have a couple questions by Feng Shui. So he asked, does it feel like these characters have been written in such a way that they are ideal for a haunting? Like, every one of them feels specifically damaged in an exploitable way?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, everyone except Philip. Philip was apparently not damaged at all.
Well, Philip's the golden boy. The only reason I can't necessarily compare him to Fred is he didn't try to set a trap for the monster at any point.
True. Good point. I don't know. I do feel like they were just, yes, okay, these are characters for a horror story. They're perfectly for sending into a haunted house and potentially getting themselves killed or making some dumb decisions. I think I have to agree there. They were kind of flat in that sense, that they just kind of fit that mold a little too well.
I agree. Again, I don't know if that's intentional because there is a genre savviness to it. But yeah, they fitted a little too well. Like, oh yeah, clearly one of these individuals are going to die. And then he has a next question. In your opinion, did the author waste an opportunity by not having at least one story or snippets of stories being told from each of the characters during the quote-unquote ritual? Yep, Sade had just said that.
Yeah, okay, so because I did, try to go through what was being discussed in our Discord server, and so that stuck out in my head. I've seen, anime episodes where they do this ritual, and it's always, a fun time to, see, the different ghost stories. Hey, we should actually do this sometime when we do that.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Maybe not 100 stories, but, a story each. When we got to that part, and they're like, oh, cool, they're gonna do this ritual, I was, settling in for, a little bit of, little marathon of ghost stories, and then it, cuts, and it's, got none of it, and I was disappointed.
Likewise.
I want more ghost stories in my ghost story? Yes. I love a stuffed ghost story.
Hey, I'm right there with you. I feel like that's the perfect setup for an anthology and or some character study. So
and you're not the only one. Feng Shui actually continues and says, I felt kind of annoyed that they set that up and then kind of just skipped over it completely. Which was further annoying because they then immediately circled back to, I think, Cass, and again, I'll explain why he says Cass, saying how all their tales were complete shit and here's a real story for you. Actually, I had this discussion with Feng Shui on Discord because I said, you keep saying Cass, because I had discussed the story with some of our Discord users. By the way, if you want to talk with us between episodes about the books that we are reading on our Discord, feel free to join our Midnight Marinara Patreon. $1 a month, and you can join our Discord where we actually have discussions about the books we read for Darkly Lit. Plus, if you enjoy our other podcasts on creative horror, like Undercooked Analysis and Midnight Marinara, and our newest show, the Jameson Tapes, We actually have discussions there too. So yeah, feel free to join that. That's my plug really quickly. Anyway, I actually had a conversation with Feng Shui because he kept using the name Cass, and I said, why do you say Cass? He says, because on the audiobook I listened to, they kept saying Cass, and I'm like, really? And then I did some research. There must have been different versions of this book, because another thing that I noticed too is some of the reviews called Talia Nadia.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not sure if maybe some of these people had ARC copies, and in the ARC, Kat was Cass or Talia was Nadia. I'm not sure, but in the book we read, it was Kat and Talia.
Huh.
So
Intriguing.
I think we all actually read the book versus listened to the audiobook, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I read the book. Something about the narration for the audiobook was just, it was too fast. It was a little too grating. I couldn't listen. So yeah, I switched to the novel, or to the print on this one.
Yeah, I'm starting to realize as we go through Darkly Lit that some books work much better for the audiobook versus just reading it, and then others work really well for just reading it versus the audiobook, and some just work well both ways. It's good to be able to have both, to sample that out and see that and see the differences, especially when we were discussing the differences with
the book that we'll never speak of again.
With Imaginary Friend.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's gonna come up. I'm sorry.
That's all the questions that I have. Do we have any final thoughts on this book?
I almost want to go back and read it again sometime. I will say that much, because I wonder if there's any more I could glean from it about the relationships with the characters. If I just was so distracted by the prose. Now that I know what's going on and what to expect, I wonder if it's worth revisiting. I don't know if I will, but that goes to show that this is a book that I ultimately skewed toward liking, as opposed to finding, I don't think that my personal gripes with the book outweigh its qualities. So ultimately I came away from this enjoying it, even if I have some issues with some of the ways that it is presented.
I think pretty much the same for me. Like, I didn't really too much get out of it, but there was enough there that I really enjoyed. That I'm not mad I read it. So
same. The first chapter was a little rough to get into, but then once I started reading it more and more, I got into it, and I was able to finish it fairly quickly. Again, the haunting is my favorite part. I'm not sure if it would benefit it better to be written longer, so there would be more time for development for the characters, or if it would just be better to simplify the drama between the characters in general for this and keep it as a short story. Either way, I think whatever drama was happening, there was not enough context for me to fully understand or get involved or like the characters as much. But as a story overall, I still enjoyed it. It was nice reading a haunted house story. I always like a good haunted house story, so.
I think that's something we can all agree on. Every so often, just a good old-fashioned ghost story.
And also, one that's set in Japan. I love Japanese ghost stories are so awesome.
They are.
So we were discussing what to read for next month. There is a short story we really want to read, but we figured it would be best saved for June. But then we also discussed our plans for May, and we realized that there is a lot going on. So a lot has happened recently. One, David just got a new position, and he actually has to start training for that this upcoming month. Mm-hmm. And then not only that, around the time we typically record, Sade is actually going to be in town along with the rest of the creative horror group. And we already have a lot of plans for that time that I don't think we can actually make the time to sit down and record an episode. And it'd be nice not to worry about that while we're all on vacation. So we decided that we were actually going to be taking about a month's break. There won't be a May episode, but there will be a June episode, and this story we decided to read, it is a short story, is actually very fitting for June. We will be reading The Summer People by Shirley Jackson.
Ooh, Shirley Jackson.
What David said. Yay, Shirley Jackson.
One of our favorite books that we have read on Darkly Lit is The Haunting of Hill House. So it's nice to finally return back to her as an author. Especially this is a short story and one that is set during the summer. And the premise has to do with a couple that stays past their time, past Labor Day. So...
Oh, shit. Labor Day.
So there's actually something kind of nice about posting an episode of Darkly Lit after Labor Day about a book where bad things happen after Labor Day. Luckily, it is readable. There is a link where anyone can read it, so I will make sure to post that in the description. But, I mean, again, you have until June 13th, so...
And then, before we wrap up, I also actually just want to plug another one of our favorite books that we've read was Cemetery Boys from Aidan Thomas, and their new book, Sunbearer Trials, is up for pre-order right now. I don't think it's horror, but if you need some queer content in your life, I'm gonna pre-order a copy. I'm just gonna, I think I'll enjoy it, so I'm gonna pre-order it. So I wanted to plug that because I really loved Cemetery Boys. I need to support the author.
Plus, Aidan Thomas recently posted on Twitter, again, we made a joke about this, as they're doing a gay Titanic in space.
Yes, that is not the premise for Sunbearer Trials. That is something else. But
No.
That I'm also excited for. Ray Vel gave me a pin for my birthday once that is just this purple glittery star that says Space Gaze. So I'm down.
Hey, if anyone knows of a good space gay horror, please let us know. If you want to reach out to us, you can reach us at our Twitter, at DarklyLitPod. As well, you can also email us at darklylitpodcast@gmail.com.
You know, I've never hosted, or given a contest premise for creative horror. Like, can I just gay space horror? Can that just be my theme for a contest?
Oh my god.
Gay space
Yeah.
horror.
Oh my
Okay, there it is,
God.
the gay space horror writing contest.
Oh my god. You know what?
We gotta pitch it to the rest of the team, but start forming some ideas, guys.
Yeah, I love this idea so much. Oh my god, gay space horror. Yes. Okay. Be on the lookout. I think this might be our next writing contest.
We'll see.
I love these moments when we have when this epiphany happens. This is great.
So we have about 100 candles that we have to...
Oh boy.
Why did you do this? Can we eat all this delicious food first?
Hell yes. Itadakimasu.
Itadakimasu.
Good evening, intrepid listeners. This is the Pasta Shade, the host of Midnight Marinara, and this podcast is part of CreativeHorror.com, a network of podcasts and creators working together to build a constructive community of horror fans. For more content like this, visit us at CreativeHorror.com.